You totally have to turn your mind inside out and upside down to accept globe theory, heliocentrism, modern astronomy, whatever you want to call it. I mean, like you have to basically, it's the equivalent of being, sodomized, mentally sodomized, in kindergarten to buy this shit. Because here's the thing of it is, the more you look into the math of, spherical curvature and, gravity and all this, that and the other, the more you'll see that there's just no, you know what I mean? They try to make it so complicated that you can't look at it. By the time you get done scribbling on the board all this fucking Christoffel symbols and Riemann tensors and all this shit with derivatives and infinity and all this crap, you can tell anybody you want whatever you want to say because nobody understood what the fuck you were talking about. But I mean, what it boils down to is space is now been determined to be flat. I mean, they're saying that the universe is flat now. Oh, really? Oh, we can't have a flat ground that we're standing on, but you want to tell us the fucking universe is flat? People don't understand that, so they can say whatever they want. But what they're saying is that the universe, space, obeys the fifth postulate, that it's a Euclidean plane, that the sky above your head takes up the same area as the ground that you're standing on, that there's no curvature to space. So everything that Einstein said about the curvature of space-time, which is basically nobody could make gravitational, spheres and gravity, all that shit work. Large bodies attracting each other through empty space. So he came up with this thing of space-time. The only way they could make the math work was to just take space and multiply it by time. So they made a fourth dimension that had the same mathematical you could interchange height, width, and depth for time. It's just completely stupid. It didn't help it at all, but at the same time, you came up with positive curvature, parallel transport, holonomy, and all these things that you'll have to owe to yourself as a flat earther to research, because there's three possible planes, or there's three possible spaces. There's a flat space, which is a Euclidean space where parallel lines do not intersect, right? And then there's hyperbolic space, which is like a saddle, where parallel lines not only do they not intersect, but they go away from each other. And like the lines on a fucking baseball. Look. And then there's, spherical, where parallel lines cross each other. So what happens is you got parallel transport, which is if you throw a vector like this and take it around a closed loop, when you get back to the point of origin, the vector should still be pointed the same way if it's a flat space. If it's a positively curved space, the vector will be pointed the opposite way. And if it's a negatively curved space, it'll be pointed in the opposite way from that, right? And so what they did was they made the tensor, the math, the matrix for the math of relativity, general relativity. They made it so that it could, you could, if you swap the terms around and jump back and forth between a couple of different mathematicians' formulas, you could come out with an equation that worked whether the space was flat, positively curved, or negatively curved, right? And so our argument then becomes, all right, well, we've got a zero value there. It's like it's Riemann tensor or the Christoffel symbol or like that, something like that, and down towards that far end of the far right of the equation, Einstein's equation, it's zero, right? Because it's flat. Look, when you travel around a square and back to your origin, the 4 90-degree angles that you turned are going to add up to 360 degrees. And if you travel around a triangle back to your origin, it's going to add up to 180 degrees. Each polygon has its own value that it adds up to on a flat plane. And when you're doing a survey, you traverse those lines flatly. You might have to change elevation when you get to the next spot, but you'll then make a flat line to your next spot, and then when you close that circuit, if the angles don't add up to Euclidean geometry, you have to start over, because you can't survey someone's property and say, oh, well, all the other surveyors around me, their squares add up to 360 degrees, but mine are a little more than that, right? You can never, all surveyors have to use linear geometry. They have to use Euclidean geometry, or you can't survey, because the property lines would cross, and that's not the way things work. You know what I mean? A curved surface doesn't have any squares on it. It doesn't have any triangles on it. The only flat space on a curved surface is a circle. And that circle would be a slice off the side of the curved surface that would cause it to basically have a shallow dip in the center, right? Because if the flat surface that we see is actually a curved surface, but it just looks flat to us, then that means that the chord length, that is a straight line between 2 points underneath of that curved surface, the shorter line, that would be a tunnel underneath you, would appear curved even though it's actually straight, right? So you could you could roll a ball down a flat tunnel, and it would roll into it at an angle. It would get down to the bottom and then roll back up to the other side, slow down, because the center of a flat circle on the face of a sphere with a single point of gravity in the center is going to be a low point. It's going to be below sea level, right? So the idea that the surface is anything but Euclidean is just absurd. And the further absurdity is, look, if here's your plane and here's the stars above it, there's no space in between it. Like if this is a sphere and then the celestial sphere is a larger sphere, that means there's more area in the celestial sphere than there is on the surface of Earth, which is why they say that if you drop two items side by side from space, they'll end up bumping into each other, right? Because they have nowhere else to go, because that space doesn't exist. the wedge that is between two objects that are falling and they come closer together and touch because of gravity doesn't exist. All that space is a complete it's made up. All right, so that's why they say there's no such thing as space, because the sky above us is a plane, the atmosphere is a plane, the ocean is a plane. They're not larger spheres. All right, so the universe isn't get bigger in all directions as it expands away from us in a huge fucking sphere. It's flat. They've already said space is flat. You know what I mean? So it's if there was any holonomy to the surface, when you went around in a square, you do 390-degree angles, try to come back to where you started, and there'd be a little gap there. And that little gap, it's like the Riemann gap. It's so many names for these little items, but it's just a string of bad math based on broken hypotheses that were built on. They were built on and built on. It's just a complete imagination.